The way that Forspoken drags its protagonist Frey Holland into the fantasy world of Athia feels like the classic fish-out-of-water tales that were common during the golden era of 80s and 90s fantasy films. Whisked away from her life in New York to this completely alien world, she finds herself bonded to a talking vambrace, who she derisively nicknames Cuff, and discovers that she can wield magic as a consequence. I guess that's just something that she does now. Being lost in such an unfamiliar land, hiding from massive dragons and battling smaller but no less nightmarish creatures, it would be a lot to take in for most people. But Frey's roguish attitude and self-confidence, with fairly good reason to be fair, sees her thrive in this environment. While she initially just wants to get back home, she's soon drawn into helping the people of this land instead of just looking out for herself. Though of course their goals do align to a certain degree, as Athia has been gradually consumed and ravaged by the corrupting influence known as the Break, which has been perpetuated by the Tanters, who formerly ruled this land with a benevolent hand, but have come to have a more malevolent disposition. Thankfully, Frey can draw upon the magic of the earth, dredging up rocks to be single explosive projectiles, spitting them out at enemies in rapid fire, or creating an earthen shield that then fires back in a shotgun-like blast. These provide the basis for her attacks towards the start of the game, but they're quickly supplemented by support magics that can summon an ivy whip to deal damage all around Frey, bind enemies in a tangle of weeds, or summon plants that will fling rocks independently at enemies for you. It builds up to a super attack that brings a wave of rocky spikes out of the ground in front of Frey. The earth magic is just one of several types that Frey will learn through the game, her abilities further augmented then by the necklace and cloak that she wears, as well as being able to paint magic augmenting symbols onto her fingernails, just like the Tanters do. Combat in Forspoken is an interesting blend of unleashing these ranged attacks, support abilities, and then this wild, flamboyant energy of movement that is wrapped around it. It took me a while to get used to the combat, training myself to not fiddle with the right analog stick too much, which loses the lock-on because of you doing this, and then learning that you can just hold a button to use up the pips of magical parkour dodging, with Frey then flipping and tricking around anything that comes her way when you do so. Up until, of course, you run out of this dodge. Each battle is then graded depending on how you perform. It all gradually grew on me through the few hours of playtime that I had, building up to a titanic battle against Tanta Sila, one of the corrupted rulers of Athia. And if the combat took a while to grow on me, so too did the game's setting and the manner of which it tells its story. There's some weaker moments from the two sections of the game that we got to play, both coming from earlier chapters in the game. In particular, there's a faux stealth sequence while escaping imprisonment that just feels really quite forced, from the pacing of the dialogue through to the actual stealth, which was more like walking through the environment. Similarly, the way that Frey is brought to feel attachment to the people that continue to survive in this land is right out of the Hollywood book of narrative tropes. Then there's the dialogue, which was lampooned from the story trailer released a couple of months ago. It is still in the game, but it does work a little bit better in the context of Frey finding herself in such unfamiliar lands, and talking to some glitzy bangles on her arm, of course. So yes, there's these growing pains, but they will fade as you get deeper into the game, I feel. Certainly, they became less of an issue once I had the freedom of the open world to explore, making use of Frey's magical parkour skills to race through the world at superhero speeds. The world is big and broad because of this pace of movement, having a wider wilderness field that's not too densely populated to allow you to move and dip into battles with the roaming, zombified humans and other beasties if you so wish. Alternatively, you can just keep on dashing past them and get to wherever it is that you want to. Dotted around are refuges that you can unlock for fast travel, and occasional challenge dungeons that you can venture into and take on strings of battles. At least, that's what the tone of the relatively calm open world near the city of Shepal was. Jumping ahead to a later chapter, Frey was assaulting the mountainous castle of Praenost that Santa Sila calls her home, and the tone here shifts significantly. The environments are cast in this reddish light, and the enemies are much more challenging, partly due to having skipped ahead in our hands-on session and maybe not having been able to unlock quite as many skills and abilities. And those enemies come in numbers that draw your attentions in multiple directions at once, making for some quite challenging scenarios. There's a great deal of verticality here, but you're able to scale many buildings and canyon walls with relative ease. Getting into the castle, you're then faced with a choice. Do you want to barrel in through the front gate and fight your way past the enemies, or try to find a more subtle way up and into the castle around a sneaky side passage? Naturally, feeling a little bit underpowered, I chose the latter option. It all really comes to a head as you're facing Tantasila, as she unleashes flaming attacks and taunts you through the multi-stage boss battle. Then again, Frey gives as good as she gets with some of her own verbal barbs. It was by this point that I felt like I really had a much better handle of the combat, continually peppering Syla with attacks and understanding how the game will hold your hand to a certain degree through locking on and being able to dodge attacks by just holding a button instead of needing to time them. It's a fine balance to strike, but I feel that Forspoken has got a pretty good balance here of challenge and accessibility. All in all, it feels like there is something to Forspoken, and it's clear from spending an extended time playing that certain trailers and last week's demo haven't necessarily put the best foot forward. The narrative works well to drop you into this fantasy world, the magic that Frey wields feels powerful, the action is often frenetically acrobatic, and the speed at which you zip around the world is really quite enticing. We've only really scratched the surface of what this game can be, and I'm certainly keen now to see more when it comes out early next year. That's all that we've got for this preview, but make sure to like, subscribe, do all of the usual YouTube things if you've enjoyed what you've seen. If you want to try the game out for yourself, well, there is the aforementioned demo on the PlayStation 5 store, so go over and check that out. And with that, I hope that we will see you again soon. Goodbye.
Guess friendly fire isn't a concern for you, huh? My soldiers would gladly lay down their lives for my cause! This is gonna sting! Coward! Weakling! Are you too craven to face me? Nah. We shall never concede, for Kranos